So the question was, what do you really need in place to have a successful crowdfunding campaign? I guess from a business plan standpoint, crowdfunding is your pre-business plan phase. Okay, crowdfunding is before you even think of a business plan. Test the waters, right? In many cases, not on the debt side, of course. Debt, like anything else, you need to have established track records before people are going to loan you money with the expectation of getting repaid. But I mean, I think Steve alluded to it, and I'll pass it back over to him. Business plans are an old way of doing business. No one reads them. I think he was nice. He said, I rarely read them. I don't think anyone reads them. They are so fluid that they're changing even faster than you can print them up, right? So, I mean, I'm a big believer. We taught in our course the business model canvas, okay? If you have some time on your hands, I highly recommend getting Business Model Generation. This is Alex Osterwalder's book about how to iterate and create a business plan, basically using Post-it notes that is fluid and taking into account the evolving landscape. But the key is to focus on who is the customer, what problem am I solving, and how am I doing it differently than anyone else. And you can definitely convey that with the tools that crowdfunding offers you. Primarily, it's a video. On the corporate side, right? When you're looking for serious investors, they care more about the due diligence documents. I mean, or do you have clean documents? I mean, that was like our biggest focus at the accelerator. Are you incorporated? Are there any liability issues with your IP? I mean, do you have your books in order, even if you don't have revenue? Is everyone a legal citizen and with no criminal background necessarily? So that is far more important than the business plan side, although as equity crowdfunding gets bigger, that will be more of a focus, right? Comparing one to another, I mean, it's going to be a lot more on the diligence than it is on the video, if you will.
And the only comment I would make is the company we invested in had already generated about $350,000 in crowdfunding. Because they had pre-sold their products. And so for us, it was validation, like what I talked about, market validation. We liked the idea. And then we went in and did our own due diligence.
Right.
I don't know, any other questions from the audience?
I had a question for Steve. Steve, as an investor, talk a little bit about how the trade-off between long-term vision and short-term ability to execute when you're looking at a potential investment.
I think you got to find the right investor because look, all of us. I think what Travis said is true. We're motivated by more than money. I mean, however, that becomes the first priority when you're looking at what the return is. I mean, some people are willing to sort of take a longer view. I've often said when I've been on the development side, what I need is a financial angel who's willing to stick with me for some period of time while I develop the market that I see is out there, right? And so you just got to keep talking to guys. It's hard to give you a definitive answer. Some guys are really going to say, well, I need to see break even in year 2. Year 3 is too long for me. It's just really finding the right investor, which is why strategics are probably a better fit because they may be more patient. I mean, someone once said there are no patient investors. I think strategics might be a better time. It's just finding the right guy. And some may be more motivated by the philanthropic idea. They want to see a return, but they're not so needed to see it in the next 2 years. They're willing to wait for. It's finding the right guy. Was that helpful?
Any other questions from the audience? Hold on, let me bring you the microphone. I'm Mike Douglas here.
I wanted to know what you guys thought of the business hypothesis. I've seen some entrepreneurs pitch on the basis of they don't quite have a plan yet, and their investor deck isn't ready to go, but here's their hypothesis, and they're starting to sell on this basis.
I think that's a species of what I talked about in the sort of test launch or a lean launch or a lean startup, and I've seen some of those, and I think to the extent that you have credibility with customers, sort of being willing to sort of buy the product or interested in the product, and you've got some kind of research, then you get an investor who's interested. So yeah, it kind of goes to what we're both talking about. The old way, and I think Travis said it well, the old way of selling a business based on a business plan is not how we do it anymore. And the investors have said, I want to see the plan, meet the team, go right into due diligence on asking all the tough questions I know I have to ask. And the crowdfunding guys are saying, gee, let's see some traction, and that kind of model presents the opportunity to see, hey, maybe the business can work. Let's then go fill out what it's going to take to, design, produce, market, sell the products.
I mean, just building on that real quick, hypothesis is, I think, the wrong way to think about it, right? Having a hypothesis is essential, right? You have to see, it's new, it's obviously hasn't been done. More likely than not, it has been done by, people you just never met or heard of before. Unless you go out and test the hypothesis, get somebody to pay for it, get somebody to buy in and use the product, right? It is no different. I mean, you hear lots of advice at all sorts of events you might attend, right? Something that has stuck with me forever, a guy by the name of Brad Feld, one of the mavens of tech accelerators, is a VC, and he said, ideas, right? Everyone in this room has had a great idea today, probably, and you will have 10 more this week, okay? And you see companies, oh, I thought of that last year. If only I had built my own search engine and called it Google, right? So, but the idea that separates an entrepreneur from somebody who is, a dreamer is actually proving that you have the ability to go and do something, okay? So hypothesis, I think, is only half of the picture unless you can prove that certain elements of the business model can actually be done by you and your team. So in many ways, that's kind of where I am with my business, right? We've hypothesized, a lot, too much. And so now it's about, okay, well, this is our vision in a year and a half. Okay, well, what do we do now? Step one, we just need to prove that this guy will pay us money for this, right? So that is what we're in the process of doing. So before we even look to raise any sort of money or get sponsors, we have to prove that there is something behind the hypothesis more than just thought.
Said another way, investors won't pay for ideation. Investors pay for execution.
Much more succinct. That's way better. Why use 2 and templates?
So I have a question regarding the crowdfunding. Basically, I think that if you go to individual investors, I think that you also get the connections through that specific investors. Would you think that that's also the case for crowdfunding? Because, I don't know, maybe, you get to connect with a whole bunch of other investors. I mean, I guess that's the nature of crowdfunding. But at the same time, do you think that we can also benefit from, their networks through the crowdfunding, I guess, the web?
It's a good question. I mean, I think there's different goals that different types of crowdfunding campaigns can serve. One is more of a get the word out and validate a product, right? Some of the crowdfunding sites right now for accredited investors are more strategic in the sense that even though there's a web interface between you and person with money, there still might only be 10 or 15 people who support you, much like an angel group, New York Angels, Jumpstart New Jersey, there's many out there. Think of the platform itself as it's a marketing tool, but it's also it eases everyone's business, right? It's a place to maintain the documents, to maintain the money, keep it in escrow. So for accredited investors, there's still a value to not just using crowdfunding, but also for the companies raising that way to connect on a personal level. I mean, still, in many cases, we'll meet the investors. On a practical side, though, if you have 2,000 investors, most of whom have no idea anything about the industry, you want to make sure that their voices are minimized to a degree, and you don't have to answer to 2,000 masters. So there's different ways, I think, even within crowdfunding.